there's still conversations about whether they should cite ChatGPT. And
Right.
that's mind blowing for me. Why would you want to cite this? It is not an authoritative figure. It's not a researcher. It is not someone who went out and actually did the research according to some theoretical framework, went through the data, did the analysis. It's not an authoritative figure. It's just a machine that predicts the next token. There's no analysis going on. There's no real thinking going on, at least in the way that humans do.
Welcome back to season 4 of the Educational Leadership Show, and I'm so excited to launch our first episode of this new season with Dr. Soroush Sabbaghan from the University of Calgary, who is the Gen AI Leader in Residence, a title that is, I don't think any other institution has such a title. And it was one of the reasons why I was curious to reach out to Soroush about this role and also his just journey into it. This is a true researcher, scientist, mathematician, coder, all those things sort of brought together to really understand what's happening with this new emerging, I hate to say technology, because that almost belittles what this really is, the impact that this is already having and that we're all experiencing. So it was just a great opportunity to have him come along and just share some insights that he's certainly farther ahead in this thinking than I am in many respects. So what a treat it is to have him share. He's also going to be sharing at our upcoming AI Summit in Surrey at the beginning of October 2025. If you're listening to this before that and you want more information about that, certainly reach out because you're likely invited to this. But great to kick off this season's episode with Dr. Soroush Sabbaghan from the University of Calgary. Tell us, first of all, a little bit about the role you're serving now and how you got there.
The role wasn't planned, or to get the role, it wasn't planned. I have a pretty good background in both mathematics, statistics, and languages. And they came about because my bachelor's degree is actually in genetics and plant breeding. And that involves a lot of statistics. So that's where my statistics background comes from. My father was a pure mathematician. So growing up, a lot of math was involved in our household. And I studied languages and teaching languages. And when you bring all of these together, it fits pretty well with what's happening with generative AI. I always had an affinity with technology. I used to code, or I coded as a hobby. So I had a coding background. I think I was in the right place, right time. And when generative AI emerged, I saw it as something that could be useful in about 10 years. I remember my first point of connection was this paper I read about GPT-2 and how it was going to impact writing. And I read it and I thought, okay, this is going to change the world in about 5 years. And this was in late 2021, I think, or mid 2021. And then after that, things just accelerated. And I spent a lot of time learning about the technology and the way it works and started tinkering around all the way up to this role, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and it's funny when I often show people in some of my presentations the timeline of generative AI, and it was news to me. Of course, most of us, it was November 2022 when we became aware of it, but I think it was ChatGPT 1 was released in 2018 or something like that. And of course, for the majority of us, we didn't pay attention because it didn't really do anything that most people would think is worth, and it wasn't released and all of that stuff. So that's an interesting kind of, you talk about early adopters, that puts you way ahead of it. So just when you first sort of are reading this paper and discovering it, and so there you are thinking, this is 10 years down the road, and you would say you were wrong with that prediction, right? So, but what was it like? Even thinking back to that your sort of first interaction with it, like, what was it that made you, like excited, or like what were the early things that at that point that were telling you this was something that we would be needing to pay attention to?
I guess there was both awe and concern at the same time. I thought that, okay, if this is a tool, is a language model that is going to be able to provide human level language through this token prediction idea, that's going to help a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It's going to help people develop plans, it's going to help people edit, it's going to help people critically analyze their work. But at the same time, I thought once this technology comes out and becomes available, if you don't know how to use it, and I was thinking at the time, we need to teach people how to use it. We just can't release it into the world. That would be insane. Why would you do that? Then it's going to do a lot of good. But again, I read the paper, put it aside until GPT-3 came. And then I suddenly realized that this is going to be a thing. I didn't know at the time that they were working on ChatGPT, but they released it into the world without offering or giving us a heads up on helping people understand what this technology is, how it's meant to be used, what its purpose is, how was it trained, who trained it, why does it exist? All those fundamental pieces that you need in order to be able to work with this tool properly.
I mean, I will get into your current role now, but I want to kind of go down this path a little bit more here. And all right, so and this is again for those that haven't been paying close attention to the origin. Many people were saying at the time this should not have been released. This was like way ahead of it. There were too many questions and concerns, as you started to kind of allude to, that we really got to pay attention. All right, so here we are, essentially 2.5 years since that November 2022 moment. How it feels like, and again, everything you're saying resonates with me and is spot on. So how have you been sort of working to essentially backfill all of the things that should have been done but haven't been done? So when you think about that, which is a big, people say the cows are out of the barn or whatever metaphor they're using, and we're trying to kind of rein it in a bit to say, like, let's be a little bit more thoughtful. What have been sort of the ways in which you've tried to do that as best you can, even though, it's gone far beyond anything you have any control over, we do as educators even?
I've learned through my career that every time I want to deal with the unknown or an unknown entity reveals itself and I have to deal with it or face it, it's very helpful to go back to the fundamentals, the value and the belief systems that I have or we have to kind of guide us through all the confusion, right? So when it comes to education, at least, universities and K to 12, we are in the business of learning. We try to provide the tools, content, knowledge to help people find their way, find their path through life, right? That's, I guess, in a very high level, what we do. And so the tool was incorrectly used to write essays or to cheat, or there was a lot of academic dishonesty. And I think that's partly because we weren't given the ability to help people understand how to use it in order to enhance their intellectual capacity and in order to enhance the effectiveness of their learning, which is how I think we should be using the tool. So the backfill is going back to the fundamentals of our flag. The flag that we carry is learning. So how can we use this technology to support our this fundamental? How can we use this technology to enhance learning, to make it more effective, to enhance our intellectual capacity, to enhance our critical thinking, to enhance our creative abilities? What ended up happening early on, at least, is people started offloading these things onto this technology. And I don't think that the people who created it wanted the general public to use it that way. It was always meant as a tool to enhance your capacity, particularly your intellectual capacity.
Well, and I think there's a couple things that I think in my mind speaks to. Number one, you mentioned this idea of it's requiring us to go back to our values. Like, what do we actually believe? And I think and that, that's been a big part of my work in helping people really sort of build out their guiding principles. Like, you have to know what you believe and what you're there for. And that we were never there for to produce, like, we really weren't interested in the essay. We were interested in what got you there, like what was going on inside of your brain. Like, so outputs and have never been in the purest form really the goal, but we've just had difficulty in trying to, I think, number one, articulate that, because there's always been a little bit of tension there. So that's causing some angst and sort of revisiting that. But the other piece here, as you talk about that work, is the dividing line between when a developer creates this to amplify, there's a presumption that you're bringing to the table certain amounts of skill and understanding and expertise, if you will, whatever that is, to amplify your work, as opposed to, especially in the K-12 notion, people that have not yet developed those skills to be able to do that. So there's a real sort of dividing line there. And I'd like to go a little bit more into this idea, because I know you work with both K-12 also, even though this role that you have at the University of Calgary is post-secondary. How do you kind of figure out where that line is between, if you use it out of the box without, you can go really far with it, but the problem is, if you haven't got to that point, it can cause problems. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on sort of the differentiation between, what maybe it's post-secondary, the way you see this and the values that exist there, and some of the things that you've done when it comes to K-12.
I think there is a, I'll put it this way. I always go back to theory of why is something happening and try to explain it through a lens of theory. So if people are offloading, especially the K-12 students, are offloading their critical thinking that they're supposed to do on an assignment onto this application and submitting it, it's probably because they lack some other skill that prevents them on that for doing this particular task. And I think, and there's literature around this, I think it has something to do with self-regulation. And this is true both in the K-12 system and also in the higher education system. So I also sit on the university's academic misconduct board. I'm an officer. I get academic misconduct cases. And when you see these cases and when you hear the stories, a lot of it has to do with forethought. So a student might have gone that path because they didn't plan properly. They didn't think it through. They didn't think that this particular assignment would take so long. They didn't think that this particular topic was going to be as complex. And so some of them do plan, but they're just planning correctly. And so they find themselves in a very precarious situation, getting pressure from friends who said we've used it, or they have parental pressures. I'm not going to go into that, but there's something that happened before that had led to them offloading whatever it is that they offload onto the assignments. So if we can help students use this technology to plan correctly, say I'm studying a economics year one student at university, and I have my course outline. I don't know the topics. I don't know how much time I should be spending for this topics on this course outline. I don't know them or the assignments. So one of the things that this technology can help me is plan, because the technology would know how much relatively, like the different levels of complexity across the different subjects. I can
Right.
get some input, right? There are other ways that the technology can help us in order to keep us on track of thinking rather than offloading. So, for example, the technology can help us self observe, like I could, or even do the planning. So, I need to write the assignment, help me understand, give me the outline for it, give me 3 outlines for it, tell me the difference between the different ways I can write this so I can choose one. And also let me know how much time this is going to take or how much time I should budget. Or I can write, give what I wrote and the rubric and say, give me feedback. So self-regulation, I think, is key here. And that's what I tell schools, and also within my role, I'm trying to help people understand that this technology can be used for you to plan, to write, and to critically analyze what you've written. And all of that in the service is in for the service of learning, which is ultimately our key goal, right? If you offload this onto a machine, you get a shiny diploma at the end, but no one's going to hire you because you don't know the content. You have literally replaced yourself with the machine because you've offloaded onto the machine.
So many good things you've said there, Soroush. I think the one thing that I hadn't thought about before, the way you framed it, is coming into these, these academic integrity violations, if you will, and rather than, you know, trying to figure out what the correct punishment or whether the kid actually did cheat is the motivation behind it, right? Like, why did they? Like, because I think in most cases in my conversations with K-12 and maybe in post-secondary, but I don't know. I don't want to say that. The reason kids cheat is they either don't care, so they're not motivated to do it, so they're just doing it, or they're so focused on, the carrot at the end, the diploma, whatever that is, that they're just trying to jump through a hoop and they don't see the value in what that is. Which I think, but you've identified the fact, when you use the example of they didn't plan correctly, they just felt panicked and pressured. Like, I think there's multiple reasons why, and I don't know that, number one, students, I know they don't fully understand what they're giving up when they're doing that. So they don't have a sense of that and they need that guidance. But I guess what I'm curious about with that, I think, is, and this is where I do see a difference in a K-12 and a post-secondary environment, in that I've been telling people in K-12, the great advantage that we have is that our education is foundationally built on relationships. You have 30 or sometimes fewer. I understand sometimes more, but the idea is, like, if you suspect a child of any kind of infraction, that you would go up to them and have a conversation with them. But I see instances in a post-secondary where they don't know their students to the same degree. There's first year classes where there's whatever, hundreds of kids in that class, that kind of environment. So the expectation is not the same, or the culture is not the same. So I wonder how you address just that notion of, the ability to have a relationship and speak with a child, where that may not always be the case in a post-secondary environment. So I don't know if you can kind of, sort of distinguish between those two environments, maybe.
Um, I can tell you a story that can lead up to it. When I was I think it was in high school, maybe grade 9, we had this shop class, I guess, where we learned how to cut wood and weld and all that kind of sort of stuff. And I remember this instance where we had to weld two pieces of metal together. And the instructor would then hit that bit 3 times with a hammer hard. If it broke, you kind of failed. And if it didn't, if it held, you passed. That was the assessment. And for some reason, I was terrified of that. So I had my friend Massimo, and I remember him, do the welding for me. And I gave it to the instructor, to the teacher, and he hit it and it held. And then he very quietly said, "This held, but it bent. So I want you to do it again. And you're going to do it in front of me." And he basically caught me, but he was trying to show me that I shouldn't be afraid of it, that I can do it by myself. So he stood there, gave me a couple of pointers, and I did it. And he hit the welding pretty hard, and it held. It didn't bend. And that was the last time ever in my life that I cheated. So it goes back to relationships. I think it's really important. A couple of things happened there. First of all, he modeled for me what appropriate response is. Didn't yell or shout or punish. And he kind of knew why I did it. I was terrified of it. And he kind of walked me through. He modeled the correct way of doing it. And then he demonstrated that I can do it without having my tool, which is in this case was Massimo. And I think it's the same over here. We need to empower teachers so they can model correct use of these tools to students, help students understand that they can do these assignments and they can do it well. And they can use these tools appropriately to do it better than the tool, or if they were doing it themselves alone, right? So you can write something alone yourself, the tool can write it, but you can do something incredible, superhuman, if you mix the two together. And that's what you want to model and teach, right? You want to say, this technology is here to stay. You're going to get a shiny diploma. You're going to go to university. You're going to go into the field. And what people are looking for is, how are you going to leverage this technology to do something incredible? That's going to be your job interview. And in order for you to do that, not only you have to understand the content and believe in yourself and believe in your capabilities, but also know how to use the tool properly.
That's powerful. That's a powerful example. I really appreciate that. So let's just ask. I'm curious about what is a Gen AI expert in residence role look like. So tell us a little bit about what that role looks like at the University of Calgary.
It's the inaugural role, so we're we're building it as we go. But I think that, again, my thinking around this is we are in the business of learning. So fundamentally, universities exist to help people learn whatever it is that we're teaching. We're giving them the tools, the confidence, the knowledge to move forward. So that means we have to help students understand how to use the tools properly. We have to help instructors understand how to use the tools to enhance teaching. And we also have to be careful when it comes to assessment, particularly when these tools can be used in the context of assessment for learning and when they can be used in the context of assessment of learning. And sometimes that means that we should ban the tool altogether, especially when it comes to the assessment of learning. So I think that it's a 3-pronged approach. It's about student engagement and helping them understand, giving them the confidence that they need and the knowledge to use these tools. It's helping faculty teach better, enhance their teaching capacity, and also understanding new principles or new directions that we need to consider or move forward when it comes to assessment.
Can you give me any sort of early wins, if you will, either working with a student or faculty, or just kind of that was like, oh, that's what this job is meant to do. So do you have any kind of early stories or victories, if you will, around this three-pronged
I
approach?
started in May, Dean. So just coming up with the three-pronged approach is
Right.
now I think that engagement will happen September-ish. So no stories
Yes.
just yet.
But I mean, I think that's just to your point, that framework I think is going to serve you very well. And I think those are, and I'm, as you're sharing this, I'm adopting, I'm thinking about these ideas as I work with K-12. So I know you have worked with K-12. So talk a little bit about some of that work specifically in the K-12 realm.
In the K-12 realm, I think the goal is to help teachers understand what this technology can do. The first product that came out, this ChatGPT, it was designed to be a chat, but most people used it as, here's my prompt, give me a product. And they didn't follow up really. And I think that we need to help them understand that this technology can be used in many different ways. One of the most important ways, I think, is helping teachers use this technology to create lesson plans based on the Alberta curriculum. And the lesson plans that we create using this technology, they have multiple paths. It's designed to help teachers see all the different possibilities, all the different ways they can go in teaching a particular learning outcome or help students achieve a particular learning outcome. And I think that once teachers who help me build this product, so their voices are in the tool, it's a fundamental belief for me as an educator that whatever educational tool that we build, the users have to be the main voice or the main driver of the technology itself, the tool that we build itself. So once they get to design their own AI powered tool, they get to see what the opportunities are and what the limitations are, and they can then transfer that into the classroom and help their students understand what the opportunities are and what are the challenges. And I think it's certainly a unique way of helping teachers understand how to use the technology in their classroom for the betterment of their teaching.
So you designed a tool, it's called Smarty. Is that kind of the tool that you've kind of built?
So Smarty is for the K to 12.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for higher education. For the K to 12, we design AI powered lesson planners, and different school districts have different names for it. But fundamentally,
Sure.
that's what it is.
And they're built sort of as an API on top of like OpenAI. Is that kind of where it's?
Yeah. We'll use different APIs for different purposes, but yeah, basically it's a wrapper.
So I think about that. So that seems to be, when I look at the in the K-12 marketplace, for example, and there's other more commercial tools, Magic School, Teach AI, School AI, all those, they're all sort of built around the same concept, right? Is they create the wrapper, and their sort of business model is trying to create the best wrapper one, the one that's most accessible, that makes the most sense. And then I think about, I think Claude has now a learning mode option in there as a more of a higher ed model too. So is that really the key to kind of reining in the wild west or openness of any LLM, is to try to create this, essentially this learning mode where it just does not give anybody any answers, but continues to act more like a highly advanced tutor would in terms of interacting with students? Is that kind of essentially, in a nutshell, what you're trying to get to move towards with these tools?
We try to hyper personalize them. So we make tools that are specifically designed for a school district. And we put in the backend philosophies and pedagogical designs that are unique for that district. So when a teacher is working with the tool, they don't have to worry about that bit because it's already in the backend. The rubrics are already created. It's the same across the district, for example. Or if they want to only focus on performance-based or play-based learning, that's the options that they have, one or the other. Their assessments are aligned. So there's a lot that we can do with these tools to help teachers. Not only, the idea is to give teachers a wide range of paths that they could take, but show fidelity to the district's philosophy with regards to teaching, learning, and assessment.
Sure. And then do you find that there are fewer instances of hallucinations within this model because of the way you framed it? Or is that rate sort of, the same no matter what LLM you use? There's always some degree of that.
They're definitely more accurate. I can't say that they're 100% hallucination free. Models make mistakes. The whole point of this is to say, look, here are the different ways you can go about teaching. Pick one that resonates or mix and match. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for whatever you put together, right? You're responsible for the accuracy. So professional judgment, teacher professional judgment is key. We don't use these tools we don't encourage teachers at all to press a button, download a lesson plan, and go to class. It's meant to be iterative, to look at various possibilities. And that's how most teachers use them. They generate a couple of lesson plans with this tool, and then they say, okay, I know what to do. And they go and do it.
Well, and I've always tried to say that the hallucination should be seen almost as a feature in the fact that it's generating, it's giving you ideas, and that your domain expertise is really critical to be able to say that idea doesn't sound quite right. And so I think I don't know, like I always say, like when people say, well, they should eliminate hallucinations, like, well, it's kind of like you said, these models are sort of designed that way, and it's kind of empowering when you find something that doesn't seem quite right. And that doesn't mean, everything else is irrelevant. It's just that I had to your point, like it's not meant to be absent of your professionalism and your thoroughness to do it. So I guess what I would kind of like to kind of hone in on a little bit is like, what do you think are kind of your biggest, I would say, biggest fears with this? I mean, you talked a little bit about your early interaction with this and what you saw and what you were concerned about. But as you sit here in, the middle of 2025, what has maybe changed or amplified in terms of let's talk about, first of all, your fears when it comes to this technology.
If you remember, Google, when it came out, it used to be this website. Now it's a verb, right? If you want to find an answer to a question, you Google it. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that this technology is going to become an authoritative sort of a figure. And if you want to find an answer to a question, you would go to ChatGPT and answer, and you would accept the outcome, right? That's my biggest fear. What ChatGPT gives you, you have to verify. Like, you have to take that extra step. You can't take what it gives you at face value. It doesn't matter if it goes on the web and finds it. It's still using AI, and whatever it pulls from the web is from this algorithm that people can pay to get distorted. So it is a version of the truth, I guess. Nothing that ChatGPT says should be considered as absolute truth until you verify it yourself. So that's my biggest fear, that it becomes an authoritative figure. In higher education, there's still conversations about whether they should cite ChatGPT. And that's mind-blowing for me. Why would you want to cite this? It is not an authoritative figure. It's not a researcher. It is not someone who went out and actually did the research according to some theoretical framework, went through the data, did the analysis. It's not an authoritative figure. It's just a machine that predicts the next token. There's no analysis going on. There's no real thinking going on, at least in the way that humans do. And that's important to remember for both faculty and teachers and the K-12 system. It is not an authority. So I guess moving forward, and I'm seeing, unfortunately, more and more people start relying on ChatGPT for answers. They submit lab results and they say, read this and tell me your professional opinion on what this is. And, that's a version, but a professional has to look at it, contextualize it, connect it to your life, your age, your context, where you come from. And then you'll get a better picture.
So what you're describing to me in my mind creates this visual of, I mean, there's all kinds of metaphors, thought partners, whatnot, but like almost like an assistant, right? Like when I hand it in, it's my name on this piece of work and I take full responsibility for this. And with the help of this assistant, I guess what I wonder about is, because I talk a lot about the fact that the more domain expertise you bring to the use of a GPT, the more likely you're to get better results. However, there are examples where you can utilize this technology to learn something you don't know very much about. So how do you sort of differentiate between, I'm using it to create something and it's helped me and I submit it and it's a combination of whatever, however it supported me and it's my work, to I'm coming this because I want to learn about something. And I've heard really great stories from students who have said, it's really helped me understand a concept that I previously struggled with. I didn't know.
The way I use it is I don't ask it directly. I point it to a valid source and I ask it to help me understand that valid source. So, for example, I'm trying to understand the ethics of artificial intelligence and robotics, which is part of Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's quite long, and there are areas that I just don't understand, right? Instead of asking ChatGPT to give me its ideas about artificial intelligence, the ethics of artificial intelligence and robotics, I say, let's go here to this source, which is from Stanford, and walk me through this step by step. Help me understand. So what does this concept mean? Give me an example, contextualize it in a way that I can. So I use it that way.
Nice. Yeah. I like
I
that.
don't use this technology to ask and answer questions. I don't think it was designed for that way. It was always designed to point to a different source and help you understand that source.
That's great. And that's a great differentiator there. So those are some fears. What about hopes? Like, what do you believe this can do to really, and again, I'm hesitant to use the word transform learning. People use that all the time, but certainly what is the betterment? Like, what does this look like if we get this right, if we implement, the 3-pronged approach that you're trying to institute, if we really do a deep dive in our values and principles and bring that to whatever we do, what are the hopes that generative AI specifically can bring to education?
I have a colleague from the Faculty of Business who also uses this technology. And he always says that this technology is going to make us superhuman. It's going to make things so fast. And I think about that. And that might be the case. It might make everything faster. It might make things more accurate. But I actually think that when used correctly, this technology is going to help us make more connections. It's going to help us think more critically. It's going to help us become more creative. And if we amplify these skills of making connections, thinking critically, thinking more creatively, we become superhuman. So my hope is that we become superhuman, but not in terms of speed, but in terms of our capacity to think critically, in terms of our capacity to make connections with other humans, in terms of our capacity to be creative, to think outside the box, not be limited or confined. That's my hope.
Yeah, and some of that pushes against sort of the the promise of AI as a time saver, and it's gonna which I mean, I can't deny that it does that sometimes. That's good, but that's not its primary. What you're kind of pointing to, that's not the big deal, right? Like that's a nice little side benefit that comes sometimes with it. But again, that's a very can be a very dangerous path to go down, in the sense that, our priority is always speed and efficiency. And that is in some respects a non-human trait, right? Like we're not, that's not, as humans, yes, going fast and being efficient is useful, but it's not I don't know that it ought to be a priority. But no, those are some fantastic thoughts, which I really, really appreciate that. I've got one more question before we kind of wind it down here. Just broadly speaking, I always kind of ask people to sort of share a person that they're grateful for in education. Could be, somebody in your past, so it'd be somebody in your present, big role, little role, but just somebody that when you think about that you're very grateful for. Do you have somebody that you would shout out today?
I guess there are different people in different stages of my life. I honestly can't remember the teacher that was in that shop class that day that helped me understand that I can do something that I'm terrified of doing and do it well. Grateful for that person. But within the realms of generative AI, there are key figures that I continue to learn a lot from. There's Philip Dawson, who is in Australia as a specialist in assessment. There is Thomas Cho from the Chinese University in Hong Kong, brilliant when it comes to centering AI around learning. Mike Perkins, with his AI assessment skills, he made me think so long and hard about his approach towards assessment. Dr. Sarah Eaton, who's in the University of Calgary, I consider her as a mentor, who's really helped me understand the ethics of how we might want to use this technology. So yeah, so these are some of the people who really
Yeah.
impacted my thinking.
Well, it is, I asked that question because I just think it's so important to name names, like call them out and say like and I think that is such an important part. And then in this emerging world, finding people that you trust, not only be for their, expertise and intellect, but as you shared, Soroush, kind of the values behind it. Cause I need to know your motivation. Like why do we do what we do there? And, it's revealing when, the Sam Altmans of the world say things that I go like, I don't know that I share your same values, because, it's, as I always say, follow the money. The money in this space is very, very critical to the things that we see each day. And that's not always for the best reasons. All right. I'm going to share with you three kind of questions that I usually like to wrap up. They're a little more kind of personal and fun, if you will, but just in terms of your own personal professional growth here, what might you share that you're currently either reading or listening to as far as professional growth goes?
Good question. I'm going to open up my tabs to see what it is that
Yeah.
I'm reading. So I read obviously a lot of academic journals. I have three open on my tab. One is the Journal of Educational Technology and Society. I really like that journal. I read a lot of that. Educational Technology Research and Development, another journal that I read often, and IEEE's Transactions on Learning Technologies. So these three are currently opened on this screen, and I spend a lot of my time, of course, reading academic journals.
So let me ask you, how would you tackle that? So would you read the article and then have a little conversation with the GPT about those, or do you not, is that not necessarily a mode of interaction that you would have?
Oh, it depends on the journal. It depends on the article and the study. I usually read abstracts first. If something catches my eye, I read the entire article. I particularly enjoy the literature reviews because it helps me make connections. The methodologies are always important for two reasons. One is that how they did the study is important, but it also is revealing in the sense that what methodologies get you published. And I think when a lot of students might not take a look at that, they might just go through it and not notice that this is a key methodology that will get you published. Maybe you should go in this direction or use this methodology. And obviously the findings and the discussion. So I guess it has to catch my eye. And once it does, the literature review and the type of methodology is really important to me.
Now, as somebody who spends a lot of time in this very, very intellectually taxing, if you will, work, it's I think it's always important to have a little bit of distraction and break. So then I always ask what people are watching, whether just to try to distract yourself a bit from the heavy duty intellectual wrestling that you have with these ethical issues, if you will. So is there anything you're watching right now, movie or streaming, that you just is kind of your getaway, if you will?
No, I don't actually spend a lot of time watching anything. Really, I don't have cable or anything like that. I do code though. That's my
For fun,
yeah,
just like
yeah.
that's okay.
That's my escape. So I have a list of programs that I want to make, and whenever I really want to go into my zone, in my element, I try to tackle that particular problem. The satisfaction that I get after I'm successful, and it might take weeks, it might take days, that's better than anything, really. The dopamine hit, that's what I'm looking for after I'm
So, but isn't that where, in a lot of cases AI really shines and can so are you using it in conjunction with
absolutely.
AI, or are you just using it outside?
Yeah,
Okay.
I write the skeleton of the code, and then I have AI go through it and make the UI or make the backend a more
Sure.
streamlined. It's fascinating to see what I was thinking it would do and what it actually did. It's a learning opportunity for me. So I use it that way.
Very cool. Very cool. My last question. So, first of all, how long have you been in Calgary?
12 years.
12 years. All right. So tell me maybe some place there's people think of Calgary, of course they think of the mountains, but that's, not right next door. You've got a beautiful downtown, other things. Just give the visitor to Calgary a little bit of a hidden gem that you like, whether it's a restaurant or a park, a museum, a trail, anything that you kind of would point out as being one of your favorite little spots in the city.
Sandy Beach is a place, it's actually a park very close to where I live. It's a place where the Bowl River is actually quite low, and the park is located within that area. And that's my little getaway. Whenever to
Nice.
go, I need fresh air. I need sunshine and fresh air and good people. That's where I go.
Yes. Well, that's wonderful. Well, Soroush, this has been a delight just to hear you. Feel like we could have talked for I know we could have talked for another several hours, lots of deep dives. And I hope we do continue to have these conversations, because there's so much that I think I'd love to hear more. And I'd love to share some of the things that we're doing in that K-12 space and make those
Yeah.
connections, as you
Yep.
say, because I think there are so many more connections than people might think offhand, because the learning is learning. Yes, there's nuanced differences that have to be explored, but in the end, we're kind of all aiming towards the same thing. So thanks so much for your time. And I wish you well as you kind of figure out this new role and what it actually means. And we'll be paying close attention, and hopefully you'll share some of the things that you're learning as you go down this path.
Thank you so much for for talking to me and taking time out of your day to do so. Yeah, absolutely. We should make connections. And I do hope that we connect sometime in the future as well.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.